Hey everybody, it's April the 7th. Hope you are staying healthy, happy, fit, getting out of the house, and doing the reading for co-philosophy. Thought I would tell you just a little bit about one of the philosophers on tap for today's reading, April the 7th. That'd be Jeremy Bentham. The philosopher and jurist Jeremy Bentham, 1748 to 1832, was born in the Spitalfields, London on 15 February 1748. He proved to be something of a child prodigy. While still a toddler, he was discovered sitting at his father's desk reading a multi-volume history of England. And he began to study Latin at the age of 3. At 12, he was sent to Queen's College, Oxford, his father, a prosperous attorney, having decided that Jeremy would follow him into the law, feeling quite sure that his brilliant son would one day be Lord Chancellor of England. Bentham, however, soon became disillusioned with the law, especially after hearing the lectures of the leading authority of the day, Sir William Blackstone. Instead of practicing the law, he decided to write about it. And he spent his life criticizing the existing law and suggesting ways for its improvement. His father's death in 1792 left him financially independent, and for nearly 40 years he lived quietly in Westminster, producing between 10 and 20 sheets of manuscript a day, even when he was in his 80s. Many thousands of Bentham's manuscripts exist to this day, the majority of which are in 2 collections at UCL Library and at the British Library. Even for those who have never read a line of Bentham, he will always be associated with the doctrine of utilitarianism and the principle of the greatest happiness of the greatest number. This, however, was only his starting point for a radical critique of society, which aimed to test the usefulness of existing institutions, practices, and beliefs against an objective evaluative standard. He was an outspoken advocate of law reform, a pugnacious critic of established political doctrines like natural law and contractarianism, and the first to produce a utilitarian justification for democracy. He also had much to say of note on subjects as diverse as prison reform, religion, poor relief, international law, and animal welfare. A visionary far ahead of his time, he advocated universal suffrage and the decriminalization of homosexuality. Pretty progressive for early to mid-19th century. By the 1820s, Bentham had become a widely respected figure both in Britain and in other parts of the world. His ideas were greatly to influence the reforms of public administration made during the 19th century. And his writings are still at the center of academic debate, especially as regards social policy, legal positivism, and welfare economics. Bentham died on June the 6th, 1832, a day before the first Reform Act was given royal assent. As per the directions in his will, Bentham's body was dissected by his friend, the surgeon Thomas Southwood Smith, and his skeleton preserved as the auto icon. Scroll up the page and you'll see Jeremy in all his glory. Research into Bentham's thought and life continues today at UCL's Bentham Project, set up in the early 60s with the aim of producing the first scholarly edition of his works and correspondence. This edition is projected to run to some 80 volumes. The guy was very productive. Bentham died. I already mentioned Bentham's death. But for further reading, sign up to the transcribed Bentham newsletter. I've got a link to that right at the bottom of the little piece I just read. His selected writings are online. There's lots to know about Bentham. He's often criticized by other utilitarians like John Stuart Mill, as we will see. But his heart was in the right place, I think you've got to say. He really wanted to reform his society and to improve the quality of life, the greatest happiness for the greatest number of his peers. He was an eccentric, or his body wouldn't be still on display the way it is, but in any case, he's a philosopher worth knowing. Also, I wanted to mention Immanuel Kant, and if you give a listen to the audio recording that I have posted for today, you can hear the opening lines of Monty Python's Philosopher's Song, which I've been talking about all along, just as a fun diversion, but also as a way for you to remember how to pronounce some of these guys' names. Immanuel Kant is the way I pronounce it. The Brits say Kant, and they have to say it to make it rhyme with the other things they sing in that song. But give it a listen, or look it up on YouTube. But a bit more seriously, Why Grow Up? Subversive Thoughts for an Infantile Age is a book by Susan Neiman. And it's a book I plan to use next semester in this course, when I hope we'll be back to something like normal. And here's the description of Why Grow Up that you can find at Goodreads. Our culture is obsessed with youth, and why not? What's the appeal of growing old? Well, consider the alternative. Anyway, of gaining responsibilities and giving up on dreams, of steadily trading possibility for experience. The philosopher Susan Neiman argues that the absence of appealing models of maturity is not an accident by describing life as a downhill process, which our culture often does. We prepare young people to expect and demand very little from us. Why Grow Up challenges our culture of permanent adolescence, turning to thinkers including Kant, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Hannah Arendt, more about her later in the little history, to find a model of maturity that is not a matter of resignation. In growing up, we move from the boundless trust of childhood to the peculiar mixture of disappointment and exhilaration that comes with adolescence. Maturity, however, means finding the courage to live in a world of painful uncertainty without giving in to dogma or despair. And Kant was the guy, remember, who said, sapere aude, have the courage to use your reason, the courage to think, use your own understanding. And that's part and parcel of growing up. It's finding the courage to live in a world of painful uncertainty without giving in to dogma or despair. We're certainly in a world of uncertainty. Don't despair. We're going to get through it. If you'll just keep your distance physically, not socially. You're very fortunate to live in the age of the internet when you can be social without being in physical proximity to the people you're talking to, hanging out with. And maybe we'll do a Zoom meetup one of these days. And I did that in my other class the other day, and a few people showed up, and it was very very restorative in a way. I get to talk to people in real time about the subject of our course, and maybe we'll want to try that in Ko-Fi. But in the meantime, I'm just going to sign off for now. I encourage you to go and check out that audio recording, and be sure you're on top of what we've come to this point: Kant and Bentham and Hegel and Schopenhauer and Fantasyland. We're getting close to the end of Fantasyland, actually. And next time we're going to take up, for the first time, that book about American philosophy by John Kay. So you should have plenty of time. In theory, you should have plenty of time to do all the reading and post some comments, post whatever questions you've got or would like us to discuss. And above all, stay healthy, be well, and I'll talk to you later.